Such a waste of time. He chose money over power. In this town, a mistake nearly everyone makes. Money is a McMansion in Sarasota that starts falling apart after 10 years. Power is that old stone building that stands for centuries. I cannot respect someone that doesn't see the difference.
Ruthless pragmatism, remember? That's why I wanted you to be the whip. The three of us were cut from the same cloth.
House of Cards is one of the best known US television adaptations set in the political drama genre. And I personally like everything about this web series, be it the aesthetics, the music, the characters, the direction, the places where the web series is shot, the lessons we learn from it, and especially how Kevin Spacey played the role of Frank Underwood, who is a corrupt and a power-hungry politician who follows the principle of ruthless pragmatism. The US television is inspired by the book by Michael Dobbs called The House of Cards. The most notable is not about how Frank becomes the president, but by what principles he followed and how he understood power better than anybody else. In this television drama, Frank is an anti-hero who paves his way to the top using a principle called pragmatism. He understood the difference between practicality and idealism and knew how to plan and scheme. He knew what it takes to make alliances and get the work done no matter what. He followed ruthless pragmatism to get from the point A to the point B.
Underwood followed the principles of pragmatism. So basically, pragmatism means to do practically, to think practically and to act practically. Everything is related to practical and sensibly handling the situations that comes in your way. Storyline of House of Cards was that Frank Underwood was a congressman and he was nominated for the Secretary of State by the President of the United States. So at the time when he was at the office, he was promised that he would be becoming the Secretary of State, which deals the foreign related matters to the United States. So he was very ambitious, which means that he was looking forward to have that position, but he was not given the position in spite of being the fact that he was promised to have that position. He was very angry at the point that in spite of all the promises that the president made him, he was still not made the Secretary of State. In season 2 of House of Cards, our congressman and anti-hero Frank Underwood pulls into his office Jackie Sharp, an ambitious younger representative. On his computer, he pulls up the opposition research he has on every other member of Congress, including her. As I watched that episode of House of Cards, I knew in a flash what Underwood didn't have, and what he would be desperate to get his hands on if it existed. But what if Underwood had instead organized this information in terms of the connections among legislators, events, statements, issues, and the likes? Underwood understood these linkages too. He knew, for example, that he could bring another congressman on board with a bill he hated by getting a lobbyist to push through a bill supporting research into a particular type of cancer from which his wife had died. Frank had this information siloed away in folders and files, but he was the one that understood the previous and potential integration among those bits of information. He had collected plenty of information to be sure. It was an integration of that information that proved, at least narratively, decisive. What if Frank had a tool that helped him connect information the same way that he had a hard drive that helped him store it? The shift in emphasis from object to interaction might help us understand how legislators and other policymaker actors behave. Our tendency is to understand individuals through a handful of use categories: lobbyists, legislators, Republicans, Democrats, candidates, spouse. Such categories gives us a shorthand for how people might behave. Shorthand that is both useful and blinding. The pragmatic approach, it seems to me, would be to shift our emphasis away from categories whose effects are not precise. Pragmatism is a principle which was coined in the United States, invented by Charles Sanders Peirce, John Dewey, and William James in the 19th century. Pragmatism tells us about thinking about solving problems in a more practical and sensible way, rather than by having fixed state of ideas. It also states that an idea or a theory is only and only true when it works and gives the desired results, otherwise it's false. Long before Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and John Dewey, when this philosophical movement was even an ism, there was a well-known extreme pragmatist in history named Niccolo Machiavelli. He wrote the book on ruthless pragmatism known as The Prince. Machiavelli starts from the premise that the function of a prince is to rule and not to guard against the threats to his rule. Indeed, if a prince does not do this,
he will almost certainly lose his rule and probably his life too, and probably in a horribly nasty way. So, Machiavelli's advice to his prince is to put this function above any moral principle or virtue. In other words, preserving rule justifies breaking any moral principle, no matter how ruthless the course of action may be: betrayals, torture, murder, deception, etc. Machiavelli is meticulous not only in his logical argument but also in supplying hard data from the hard experience of other princes throughout the history who made fatal errors. With a ruthlessly clear eye, the infamous Florentine also shows how a pragmatic prince is better in the long run for his people too. Ruthlessly pragmatic may be used today more figuratively, simply to refer to the compromising of principle and the breaking of alliances when this is necessary to secure a key objective. However, most people would simply call this attitude pragmatic. It does depend on how idealistic or realistic one is.
This was my views about House of Cards and the principle called pragmatism. So if you do like the video, please do subscribe my channel and do give the thumbs up and do comment about your thoughts and ideas about House of Cards and pragmatism. I would love to hear them. So thanks for watching and see you soon.